In this week's episode of Studio Inter, we'll be reviewing the matches against Hellas and Torino. We'll be previewing the SPAL and Roma games. Special guest Nicky Bandini, this week's Moggi, Frog and Moratti, and much, much more. Everything here on Studio Inter, only on SempreInter.com.
Per De Vrij, c'è la torre per Messina, l'ha presa! L'ha ripresa Messina! L'ha ripresa Messina! Il Toro! Il Toro! Il Toro! Il tiro! Samir! Handanovic! La recupera Brozovic, andiamo in contropiede, la porta è vuota, tira, attenzione, è gol!
Benvenuti, bentornati to another edition of Studio Inter. I am your host Nima Rutsari, wishing you all, well, I hope you're okay, because this last week in Interland has been mad. But we're talking everything from drunk driving to Conte almost resigning to Skriniar almost being sold and replaced by Izzo. Everything in there between, a typical, just your average normal Inter week. But before we get into all of that, I'd like to introduce our panelists, starting with the SempreInter.com preview writer, Mr. Mohammed Nasser. Welcome, Mo.
Hey. What a week to be back and on the pod. So really looking forward to getting into it.
Yes, for sure. And we're also joined by our good friend, Mr. Will Beckman.
Good evening. I haven't been sacked following last week's turmoil, so I'm still here. Looking forward to making more contradictory statements in the next hour.
I can't wait to listen to it. And we're also joined by our good friend who also runs the Inter Supporters on YouTube account, Mr. Fulvio Santucci. Hi, Fulvio.
Hi, Nima. Good evening to everyone. It's great to be here to comment another drama in another season final for Inter.
Oh my God, this team. Right. And we're also joined by a very special guest. She's a broadcaster and Serie A expert and writer. Contributes to The Guardian, ESPN, TalkSport, and is also on the excellent Serie A Awesome pod together with our good friends Mina Arzuki and Gab Marcotti, making her Studio Inter debut. Welcome, Miss Nicky Bandini.
You might also get one extra guest on this podcast, which is my dog Ross, who, as we established just before we started recording, is going a bit crazy. He's now on my lap, so if you get sniffing noises into the mic, I promise it's not me.
Well, welcome Ross and welcome Nicky. It's good to have you both. This is a bit of this past week. I mean, Inter is generally Inter. Everyone knows that it's crazy. Things are anything but quiet and boring. They don't have the time to. But I have to say, these past 7 days have been really something special. From emails being allegedly sent to everyone at the club when they were just supposed to be sent to the president, from Brozovic drunk driving, from Handanovic losing his mind, from Conte resigning and then coming back again. I mean, I don't even know where to begin. Conte started this season by saying he wanted Inter to be less pazza. Inter are more pazza than ever. I'm just keen to hear what your take is on this entire situation. I mean, starting with the email, with the email that was allegedly sent to the wrong person. What do you think is going on at Inter right now?
The email story is an interesting one. It hasn't made it to me, if it did indeed make it to everyone at Inter. So I don't know exactly what's happened with this. You say Inter denied the story, but it's certainly a very it fits the narrative, doesn't it? That Inter that this email, which was supposedly an internal email talking about everything that gone wrong this season, addressed to Stephen Zhang, and somehow found it either to everyone or at least some people that it wasn't supposed to get to. Like I say, I don't know what to make of this story, because the email itself, I haven't managed to get hold of it, which doesn't mean that it doesn't exist. It just means that, I don't know, I think if it had gone to everyone, we would have seen it by now. The other stuff, Brozovic, I mean, there's not a lot to say other than that he's an idiot. I have very little sympathy for drink driving, I'm afraid. So that's, not great. And the other stuff on the pitch is bewildering to me. I've really had a hard time analysing it, frankly, as a journalist. You watch this team and you think you have a handle on what they are, and consistently they find ways to reverse it. The amount of good first halves into terrible second halves this season, the amount of leads thrown away from impossible positions. I mean, a goal up in the 61st minute against Bologna with a penalty and a man advantage. That's an unlosable situation, or it should be. But with Inter, when it happens, all you do is shrug because you go, okay, well, that's what happens. It's become a very odd season to analyse because I still think there's been progress here under Conte. I think that the team is in a better position. I wonder whether the team is positioning itself or not, though. Take the next step, which is really the relevant thing. I don't think I would have criticised Conte at the start of the season for not clearing out everything that was wrong, for not winning the league in his first season. But do I necessarily think everything is being put right to win next season? I'm not sure. I still have some reservations.
That's a good. I agree 100%. And I usually say, I have this thing where I say that time is relative at Inter, in the sense that Inter, a human year is like 14 Inter years, like dog years. It's like time is warped and goes really fast at Inter. And this past week has been, I mean, it's only been 7 days since we recorded this pod, and all this stuff has happened. So I'm going to hand you over to Mo. Did you have a question for Nicky?
Yeah, hi Nicky. Thanks for coming on. I'm always excited when we get a Serie A expert at large on the pod, because we get to ask overall general questions. I mean, it's undeniable that as Serie A supporters or fans, we all seem to recognize that the general standard of the league has increased over the past 4 or 5 seasons. Whether it's the players, the coaches, the general play, the number of goals scored, it's a far more exciting league. But for some reason, at the end of every season, it's the same result. Juve seem to, walk away with the title, barring that one season with when Sarri was at Napoli. But that aside, it's just the same thing. It's Groundhog Day over and over again. What do you think is the root cause behind this? Is this like an insurmountable gap by the other clubs? Are we slowly devolving into a Bundesliga, or is in fact the league improving like we seem to think or want it to be?
Well, I'm glad you mentioned Napoli, because I do sometimes feel like I've hallucinated that whole season. The amount of people who say to me, "Oh, Juventus always win without any trouble," and I think, well, that definitely happened. Napoli were, first of all, 91 points, which is an absurd number of points not to win the league with, and secondly, it had gone in the spring to Juventus and won with that Koulibaly header, and it looked like it was theirs, frankly, until they went to Fiorentina and blew it. There's a boring answer to your broader question about whether it's just that Juventus are going to keep winning and why. It's money. Like, it's a really boring answer, but it's just the truth. Since they built that stadium, since they improved their revenue streams, and since they have continued over the nearly a decade since then to continue being better than everyone in the league, frankly, at doing their commercial deals, bringing in extra revenues. The Ronaldo deal we can talk about in terms of merits and not merits, because it cost them a lot, but they're certainly taking risks and being aggressive in a way that, frankly, no one else in the league was for a really, really long time. Now, to me, I realise that this is an Inter podcast, but as a person standing back from it all, Inter are the team that look like they are most closest, I would guess, to challenging that now, right? Because Steven Zhang is a serious owner who is trying to do the same things, who is trying to bring in better commercial deals, who is working on this stadium topic, which makes me really sad because, frankly, San Siro is just such a beautiful stadium, and the thought of it coming down breaks my heart. But the overall vision is there at Inter for the first time in a while, in a way that the other clubs that are structurally built to challenge Juventus, it still isn't necessarily. I think Milan are getting better, but I don't think they have that whole picture sort of in hand in the same way. I think Roma have run into such a bureaucratic nightmare with their stadium that it's really held them back. I feel like Inter are making the right decisions, but they're still playing catch up. I think the transfers that they're making are sufficiently aggressive that this gap feels bridgeable in a short-term way. I think that Inter are not that far behind Juventus right now. I don't think this current Juventus team are that great, frankly. But structurally, there's still work to do. And all over Europe, in every league in Europe, in general, the teams that are built to succeed because they have the best revenues and the best financial setup are the ones that succeed. And that's boring. And it's not constant, right? Leicester did win in England. In another season, if it wasn't for the interruption, I think Lazio might have won the season. I really do. I think the lockdown has hurt them horribly. Atalanta are nowhere near on a financial footing with Juventus, and they were far better than them on Sunday. So it's not inevitable, right? It's not inevitable that the richest team wins, but over time, the richest team will win. So yeah, the boring answer is until someone else is doing business at something close to the same level as Juventus, Juventus will expect to win most of the time.
Build that new stadium, Inter Milan.
But because I love San Siro.
I love it too, but I mean, with modern football, I mean, it's just you got it. I mean, the match day revenue. We had David Garth on, who was the commercial venues director at Inter, and he said, I mean, you can't compare. I mean, the match day revenue that Man United make and Inter make throughout a season.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a fraction of Inter make a fraction of what they do per game almost. You know?
Of course. And the other element is that Juventus in this period, if you want to scale it over the full 10 years, are the only team that made the Champions League consistently in that period. All of Roma, Inter, Milan, the clubs that you expect to be capable of sort of having the same sort of footing as them have been in and out. So they've got a massive head start. And it's interesting because if you look at it in a broader European sense, the TV revenue that is brought in now in England is so far ahead that the Champions League is not as relevant for Premier League clubs as it is for Italian clubs. But for Italian clubs, it's still really important.
For sure. I'm going to hand you over to Fulvio now. Did you have a question for Nicky?
Yeah. Ciao, Nicky. First of all, let me compliment you for the great coverage you did so far, you provide so far on the Serie A. And I would like to cross the border between Italy and UK, like we did by talking about Alexis Sanchez. I would like to understand how do you see your future, because we know that Inter is interested to buy him. We know that it's not a smooth transition to do. So 2 questions for you. The first is how do you see the Manchester United in this? So are they interested to take back the player in the Old Trafford? And second one is your opinion about this. How do you see him the best? So either Serie A or Premier League, either Inter or Man United?
I don't think United are especially desperate to hold on to him. I think they may have some desire to be able to record a positive number on the balance sheet for him, but I don't think he's I don't personally think he has a future at Manchester United. I think they will look to move him on one way or another at this point. I think the club is moving on without him, has moved on without him, and especially in the last few weeks actually has started to seem like it's back on a positive track again. I don't think I see him coming back there. I think to me, he seems like a better fit at this point in Serie A than he does in the Premier League. I think he has a certain comfort actually in Serie A, which goes back to his time at Udinese and really the place where I think for a lot of us he sort of made his name. And I think the league, well, I can only speak for my observation of him really, but I think I've seen him look much better in an Inter shirt than I had in a while before that. I think he was lost in the mess at Old Trafford, and I think at Inter I still have questions about exactly how it works in terms of this team, the setup, the greater vision, and some of that there's questions on all sorts of players, aren't there? I mean, is Lautaro going to be there next season? But the exact sort of vision of Conte's first 11 next season I still have some questions about, but I think the last few weeks have definitely shown that he has that he can contribute and contribute effectively. Whether or not he can contribute cost effectively is another question, but I think my hunch is he'll be at Inter next season, because I think that Conte wants him, and I think he's happier in Italy than he was in England.
Yeah, that's a good point. Will, did you have a question for Nicky?
I do, yes. Hi, Nicky. I wanted to go back to the discussion that you were having with Mo about sort of the challenge for the challengers to catch up with Juventus, and I've kind of got two considerations in my head at the moment. One is that Antonio Conte, in his previous 2 experiences at top clubs, has given the best of himself in his first season in charge. The other one is that Juventus look significantly weaker and less convincing than they may have done in recent seasons, having lost more games and conceded way more goals than in previous season. So with those 2 things in mind, despite all the clear sort of limitations with this squad and the players that Conte has available, the question is there a chance that, assuming nothing ridiculous happens in the last month, Inter may have missed their real chance to win the Scudetto this season?
I'm trying to recall back to Conte's 3 seasons at Juventus. I don't know if I agree that he gave his best in his first season. It was perhaps the most impressive because at that point Juventus were coming off a 7th place finish and we didn't expect it of them, but definitely wasn't their best points tally. I think I think you can look at each of these situations in isolation. I think Conte's impact at Juventus, first of all, was transformative, and he won the title every season. So I don't see a major sort of reason to pick holes in that. At Chelsea, he came into a situation where I think there was an opportunity to win that first season, which wasn't there in the second season. I think Chelsea were not structurally positioned really to be the best team in England with everything that was going on with the money being spent elsewhere at that time. Chelsea obviously have spent a ton of money. They were the original, well, the original is not even a fair thing to say because you can go back to Blackburn, I guess, at the beginning of the Premier League era. But certainly they were a defining sort of big spender in the Premier League. But they, at the time when Conte came in, they were no longer the most lavish spenders in the Premier League. And I think he had a window to succeed and he succeeded in it. I think that the window at Inter looks different. This first season was definitely an interesting one. It was an interesting one because it was Sarri's first season and the sort of settling in period for him, I guess, offered a window. I certainly think it's true that Conte had that initial impact in a very dramatic way. And I would say that some teams, it feels like, have worked out how this Inter are playing. The question is going to be whether or not he can reinvent. And to answer that feels difficult because I think, sorry, I feel like I'm expressing this a bit of a muddled way, but I think Inter do have a longer window because the team next season is going to be different. You're going to have Akram Hakimi for a start. You're going to have potentially Sandro Tonali. You're going to have a different set of options to what you have right now. And I have some questions about whether or not the team is necessarily addressing the areas it needs most, right? I think for me, the defense has really sort of started to raise some questions. Diego Godin, as brilliant as he has been in his career, I don't think is necessarily contributing good stuff for Inter for what he's costing. Bastoni, we'll see. There's more time for him to improve, but he certainly has had some lapses in the last few months. If Lautaro goes, do you need another proper strike partner for Lukaku? Can you get the best out of Christian Eriksen? Because again, Eriksen to me feels like an opportunity unfulfilled so far. We've had a couple of great games out of Christian Eriksen, and there was that excitement right after the end of lockdown that maybe finally we're going to see what Eriksen could look like when Conte had some time to work with him, when we'd see what he would look like in a formation that was designed around him with 3-4-1-2. But I think there's a lot of unanswered questions there, frankly. Eriksen in particular, I think, has the potential to become an albatross around Conte's neck if he can't work it out. And that's why I have some particular concern about just the number of bodies in midfield. And Sanchez, who isn't really an out-and-out attacker either, how you're going to fit all that together. But personnel-wise, I think the squad is, in theory, going to be better next season than it was this season. So given that Juventus have their own problems with Cristiano Ronaldo getting older and how you play that, do you let him be the guy for another season? Do you let him go and try and reimagine what you're doing. I don't know. There's a tricky transition happening at Juventus for me, and it includes the defence as well, with Chiellini and him getting up in years. And does the Bonucci-De Ligt partnership really work? And their midfield, frankly, isn't that great in my opinion. I know Arthur's going to come in and Pjanic is going out, but I don't know. I don't see this as a closed window for Inter at all. I think the squad on paper will be better next season. So the opportunity is there. I need to see Conte prove it, that he can answer those questions.
For sure. And can he do it without setting the house on fire, which seems to be the thing. I mean, let's not forget that he threw a hissy fit because they wouldn't buy Juan Iturbe. Marotta wouldn't buy Iturbe for him at Juventus. And that's when he made that famous quote about €100 restaurant and €10 in your pocket. Then he goes to Chelsea and he decides that Diego, for some reason, that he needs Diego Costa gone, and the club don't want that, so he sends him a text message asking him. I mean, it's just. Yeah. I mean, is this guy for real? Like, I mean, is it some of the stuff that he does makes me question if he's all there at times, because it's not this isn't normal behavior. You know what I mean? Like, I don't understand what goes through his mind when he, after Bologna, starts talking about. Okay, I get that he wants to put everyone under pressure and say that you have to do better because that was an abysmal result, but then to continue all of that nonsense. After the Hellas Verona game, essentially putting Inter into a form of crisis, and you know, these rumors from people like Monblano and Ravezzani saying that Suning are seriously considering replacing him with Allegri. This does not work in Inter's favor, and it's all a self-inflicted wound. And to me, I don't know what you think, but this is to me his biggest Achilles heel. He doesn't seem to have any control over his temper.
Yeah, I agree with that. And yeah, it's complicated. Honestly, I think that I rewatched a bunch of the early season games that Inter played during lockdown for a piece that I was working on. And there were times where it was real jaw on the floor stuff. I think Inter have played this season some of the best football that they have played in years and years and years. And I'm sure you guys all have opinions on that as well, because you watch them all the time. But I think some of the football, and what's most frustrating about it, though, is that some of the football that I put in that category is in games they didn't even win. It's the games against Barcelona and Borussia Dortmund. When you rewatch them, those games stand up. It's not a false memory. Inter were brilliant. And I think that Conte is so maniacal about the specifics that that this is why I wouldn't write him off, because I feel like if you get Tonali, Hakimi, you bring back Lukaku, who's been brilliant this season, I think. You get Eriksen in for a full preseason, and you make it all work. It could be something else. It could really be something else. But the question that you raise of whether or not he can control himself enough to not bring it all crashing down is a fair one. He has been self-destructive for sure this season, and I think the Costa story is definitely relevant because, if Eriksen doesn't work out, I think it's going to become one of those examples of the club panicking because Conte was angry and signing a player who didn't fit. And I worry that even Tonali, who I think is brilliant, isn't necessarily the fit that Inter need. When you've already been... What even happens to Stefano Sensi, who is so fantastic in the first part of the season? You have too many bodies in midfield, and you have other areas. And I think there's a certain lack of control to the club's greater vision, and I worry that's being driven by Conte and his flights of rage.
Absolutely. Before we let you go, I just wanted to ask you a little bit about, because I think what we saw against Torino, and I thought it would really well, and this is something I've been talking about for a few months now, and I think that the solution to that could be a 3-5-1-1 with Eriksen as in a free role behind Lukaku. I want to pick your brains on that. What's your thoughts on that?
On paper, yes, I like it. I think that what's interesting is if you look at the games where Eriksen has given his best performances, those were, I would say, against Napoli certainly was one of his sort of real standout performances. You look at the players he had behind him, he had Barella and he had Brozovic, which probably is, technically speaking, the most sort of competent midfield I think Inter have, the most talented players behind him, and I think you definitely need to think about the alchemy of the players behind him to get the most out of him, and perhaps putting 3 together in that midfield will allow you more flexibility to make sure he's sort of supported by technical players like that, but also has, who knows, I've got Gagliardini's name in my head, but I don't think he's playing very well, but someone who's just a bit more of a lump, if you know what I mean.
Francis, yeah.
Yeah. But the thing that's bugging me with Eriksen is just, I think there's been a slight lack of personality from him. I don't think he gets off blameless in these performances, and you blame it all on the manager. I think Eriksen has drifted in and out too much, and I don't think he was free from that criticism at Tottenham either. So I need to see him ready to carry a team, because I think that's, again, without wanting to repeat myself, I think Lukaku has really done that. I think even when Inter have been falling apart this season, Lukaku has been the guy taking them on, carrying them on his shoulders, trying to drag them forward, doing the right things even when the team around him isn't. And I think he needs to be supported. I think he needs someone else who's going to do that.
For sure. Well, thank you so much for coming on. And if people want to follow you on Twitter, what's your handle? And also, if you got something coming up that you want to plug, then go right ahead.
My Twitter handle is just Nicky Bandini, CKY for Nicky. I don't know if I have got anything particular coming up. I feel like I am in the full speed ahead grind of the 2 games, 2 match days a week, 5 nights a week, 6 nights a week Serie A season right now. But definitely do tune into the Serie A Awesome podcast as well, which comes out on once a week on the ESPN FC feed. We do move it slightly from Tuesday to Wednesday, depending on those midweek games at the moment. But normally Tuesday. There's one out today. So, yeah, check that out.
Definitely, I can definitely recommend that. I love that podcast. I think you and Mina, Mina and Gab, who's also good friends of ours, who come on the pod. I really like the stuff you got going. It's really interesting to listen to.
We had a fun show today, so yeah, check it out.
Thank you so much, Nicky.
No problems at all.
Take care.
You
Bye.
too. See you. Bye.
Right. Let's talk about the past week. Let's start with the Hellas Verona game, which I guess look. The first half was atrocious. Inter were lucky to be only a goal down, and then Candreva of all people scores, as the Italians say, has a culo così. He had so much luck. Fulvio can correct me if that's the correct use of that, but he was lucky.
All right.
Grazie. No, but seriously, Fulvio, I want to hear your thoughts on this. I mean, this past week, just take it away, because I don't even know where to begin. I'm confused.
So the question is this just the past week, or there's a path on that? Because I keep listening to people that tell me that Inter is different on the post-COVID stop. But to be honest, I see the same thing. Just remember the derby in February. Atrocious first half. Inter was lucky to be down by 2, and after that they come back. And with Verona happened the same practically, right? So a lack of attitude into the approach of the game, and you can see by Skriniar, but it's not because of Skriniar, right? It's Skriniar today, or at least it's Skriniar past week. It was Gagliardini 2 weeks ago. It was
Handanovic against Torino.
Handanovic against Torino. There is this path that we know so well, and this is not changed, and this is why I'm disappointed by this Inter season. Not because of the numbers, because I can see there's some progress, but because I can see that in the last 10 or 12 games, which had covered a time frame of like 6 months, but in these last games, we keep doing the same things. Actually, we concede the same goals, we concede the same chances from the same position, with the same mistakes. Just remember Candreva in Parma, which slide against Gervinho on the weak foot. This is not acceptable, actually. No, it's not acceptable, right? And you can tell that it's a matter of the players. I'm okay with that, because we are practically full of this about the quality of the player that is not enough. But you cannot tell me that this thing are keep happening, because they're just the same, are keep happening all the same way. And it's the same stuff of the previous year, with a bit of more of quality in the field because of the more opportunities covered by the management. But at the end of the day, I don't think any real improvement on that. At contrary, I can see something worse, which is the defensive phase. That was practically the only thing that Spalletti relied to go into the Champions League spot, and now seems gone, actually, because we are not able to maintain a clean sheet until we don't play against a doomed team like Brescia. So I'm disappointed about this. I don't know your opinion.
No, I think that's a great shout. Well, Mo, what's your opinion? You're Mr. Positivity, so you got to. Last week you talked me and Michael off the ledge. Now it's time to talk Fulvio off the ledge.
No, I look on. There are certainly some disappointments to the season, especially to the way it's ending. But I also think that we have a habit of looking at things from our own perspective without seeing things from the outside. There's a reason why Inter are in second place at the moment. It's because second place and still with a fighting chance mathematically of competing for the Scudetto. And it's because other teams are screwed as well. And I think it's because of the really grueling schedule, which is especially taxing on a team. I know, I'm sorry, listeners, but I go on and on about this every week. It's especially taxing on a very shallow squad, which is what we have. We have Barella and Sensi out. We don't know what to do. Our midfield, Nicky was talking about not needing Sandro Tonali, because what are we going to do with Sensi? But what are we going to do with Sensi? Are we ever going to see him step on the pitch again? Exactly. Are we ever going to see Kwadwo Asamoah play a touch of football in a Inter kit? It's all fun and games. Everyone was really disappointed when Candreva was left out for D'Ambrosio, but we saw what he did when he came on the pitch. He missed with his poor decision making, which is his consistent, consistent problem all over. What happens? He misses an opportunity to give Lautaro an assist of gold, yet again. So it is what it is. I really enjoyed Nicky's analysis on the issue of the window. I loved her take on how Juventus might be devolving and we're evolving. I think there are disappointments to the season, but overall, I think we're in so much more of an improved space. Atalanta are a far better team than they were last year. Far better team. I mean, they have a fighting chance of winning the Champions League. Napoli, under Gattuso, let's not forget, under Ancelotti, they weren't that bad to start off with. It was just this ridiculous implosion inside the club that led to Ancelotti leaving. And then under Gattuso, they're a team that's won the Coppa Italia. They're a very strong team. And we're fighting with all these teams. Lazio, of course, we don't want to talk about them because the break has destroyed their chances of finishing the season meaningfully. But all I'm saying is teams around us are competitive, and yet we're in second place. I think we will continue being in second place come the end of the season. I think being in second place and almost competing for the Scudetto or for the top spot in the table for a good half, if not 2/3 of the season, is a vast improvement on
everything of the last decade.
Like holy water, Allahu Akbar, Hail Marys, whatever, praise Buddha, whatever, all these rituals that we do before the last game against Empoli or the last game against Lazio, it's vastly improved. So of course there are disappointments, and we need to be demanding because we're a team that we're supporters at the end of the day of Inter, and Inter should be a club that always competes and demands excellence. But we shouldn't lose sight of what's the great strides that have been made this season in particular. So yeah, that's my piece.
I may I disagree a bit with you, Mo. Even though I really
of course.
I really respect your positive attitude, because on the paper everything you said is correct. But just let me remind you what is the difference between with the gap with the first place. So with Juventus in this case, from Allegri to Sarri. Because in the last 3 seasons, in the 2017, Juventus at this point was 80 in the standings. And both 2 years ago and last year were 84. So there will be a 12 points and a 16 points of gap if we translate the situation to this season, to this inter-season. So I don't know. I think that this fact that the Juventus is way weaker than the last years, and we could see on the pitch as we could see that on the numbers, it doesn't sound to me like an improvement. It sounds like a missed chance, to be honest, and probably not to be repeated again, right? Because Juventus could be just on the transition of a new coach, which is not used to this kind of reality, of Juventus reality, which is so much different from Napoli and different from Chelsea. So this could be not repeatable. I mean, you could have a better team next year, of course. You can have a better mentality next year. You can try to do something next year. But the fact that you weren't able to annoying a little bit more Juventus, especially in the two clashes we had with them. For me, it's annoying. For me, it's disappointing, because Juventus had 76 points, under 80 points at this time. Let me tell you, with Allegri, it would never happen. Never. At least with Allegri's Juventus that we used to the last years. So for me, it's not. I cannot see this on the perspective of the improvement. But I can see that on the perspective of the missed chance.
I think that's a good point. William, last week's Moggi, what's your thoughts?
Yeah, I think I side more with Fulvio, unfortunately, on that, because at the moment I had at the start of the season, if we just take the league season, I had kind of 2 vague wishes. In just sort of numerically, and one was to finish within 10 points of Juventus, and the other one was to get 80 points, because I think those would both be, given previous gaps and given previous points totals, that would have been all right, and those are both still very much achievable with 6 games left. But the problem is kind of how you get there, and this is really what is sort of running underneath my slight pessimism heading into the next year, and maybe the year after, and that's maybe why I was asking Nicky, have we missed a chance? This trend of starting brilliantly and then tailing off in the second half of the season, it's so similar to previous years. And I don't know what that says about, I don't know what the reason for that is, because the coaches are different, the players are different, mostly. And it keeps happening. And you sort of keep having the same sort of schizophrenic performances. And that's what really, the inconsistency, that's what I find frustrating. If we'd had a sloppy start to the season and Conte had taken a while to get going, and then we sort of zoomed up to 68 points with 6 games left, and that might be different, because then the trajectory would be more encouraging. But it does feel like something has been broken, and that's why the last few weeks have been so disappointing, because this year, and I've done this before, admittedly, I didn't think the winter of discontent would be a thing, and so when it does happen, it hurts even more.
I don't want to be like that, but I mean, I was expecting it. I was just the only thing I was hoping. The only thing I was hoping for was for Conte to ease the fall.
Right. Well, okay. Well, I can tell you what I was thinking, and that's that it wouldn't happen as bad as this. Mm-hmm. So that's all I can tell you from especially having seen the first half of the season, because we've had a great first half of the season before, but they didn't always feel maybe sustainable. The performances weren't convincing, and you could maybe see a reason for a bit of a dip. Maybe when your luck runs out, or when teams start figuring out. I didn't really see that happening this year. As not maybe a little bit, of course, but not as much. And that's what's disappointing. Now, and this is without considering the sort of the slight missed opportunity in the Champions League, which admittedly was a very difficult group, but you had it in your hands. You put everything back together, and then and then missed the final match against Barcelona. We'll see what happens in the Europa League. I expect little from that, but if they win that, obviously that changes things. The cup is a bit difficult because we played well, went out. That's kind of a missed opportunity as well. But I just have to go back to what Nicky said. It's so difficult to make a read on this team because they just contradict themselves each week, or not even from game to game, from half to half. So, and I maybe expected that a little bit less. Maybe the problem is I believed Conte would get rid of the Pats a little bit quicker than he has. So, and obviously, and clearly, we've seen the last couple of weeks that's not the case.
I mean, for me, I feel really conflicted between, because I think Mo is absolutely right in what he says, but I can't help but agree with what Fulvio says, because it is a missed opportunity. Because let's remember, Inter could improve for next season, but you know who else could? Juventus, and they're already improving. And they're improving vastly. They're already going through their change, adapting fully to Sarri and his style of football, and they're bringing in some damn good players as well. So I'm really conflicted here. But for me, that's not even the half of it. It's all the chaos that he's created unnecessarily, and which he kind of seems to have realized was a mistake, because after Hellas, usually after a first half in a game like that, Conte would come out fuming and furious. But instead, he decides to say that it's a good performance, I'm happy with what they're doing, and the team immediately respond to that. And I think I hope that wasn't just a one-off. I hope that's what he's going to do from now on. I hope that he understands that he can't just be il martello. You know, he can't just be the hammer. He needs to understand that there needs a little bit of TLC involved here as well. Because these players, it's D'Ambrosio and Candreva and Gagliardini. It's like you're beating a dead horse at the end of the day. I mean, that's the way I look at it. And Gagliardini's never going to be De Rossi. Candreva's never going to be, I don't know, Mo Salah, exactly. And D'Ambrosio's never going to be whatever it is D'Ambrosio, a good version of that is, because I don't know. But you know what I mean? Like that. Well, hashtag not Maicon. No, but seriously, like that's pretty much where we are, and that's what kind of bugs me. So I am really conflicted. But this is a good segue, because I want to talk about this. I felt against Torino, something clicked. I felt in the second half, Inter looked like the old Inter that they did at the start of the season. They looked psychologically dominatori, as Italians say. They looked like a big team. They behaved like a big team, and even though there were individual errors still, they didn't look like panicked deer in headlights. And that is what I've been waiting for to see since the break, because the first half against Sampdoria was fantastic, but it was fantastic the same way a bipolar patient is happy. There's no control over it. You know what I mean? It doesn't feel controlled. It feels like you're so happy right now and then you're really, really sad. That's how it's been with Inter. But against Torino, I felt like the meds were working and the patient was responding, to finish that analogy. And it looked like it was a controlled kind of game where they clicked and they knew what was going on. I don't know if you agree, Fulvio.
Well, my genuine sensation here is that the team and probably Conte as well, at some point of the season, which I recognize after the first part of the season, when you started the second half of the season at 46 points, the roster, the squad, the players, and for me, Conte as well, just decide for some reason to set on that position, because I cannot see any improvement from them from that point. If you remember the games in December, there was some disruption, but it was due to injuries. Just remember that Borja Valero is playing practically regularly now, but he didn't play a single minute before December. So I could recognize some alibis. I could give some alibis to the squad. But my sensation is that these players just sat on the standing that they had without aiming for something more. And that's the impression I have from Conte as well. I started to see from the Lecce's game, which was the first of the second leg of the Serie A. I can see Conte that was not agitated at all. right? It was calm. It was I don't know, a bit sitting on the situation. So probably, I don't know. It's like at that point, Conte realized he cannot win with his players this season, no matter what the effort, no matter what the changes. And I cannot see any improvement on the team. I mean, okay, you talk about the click, and this actually pissed me off more than ever, because that proved that Inter can play and can play good, but just decide not to do that, because we are full of games that was playing half. I mentioned the derby, but I can also mention the Borussia Dortmund game. Incredible first half in Dortmund, and after that the second half practically not played. Collapse. Not played. Yeah. And Fiorentina as well. Fiorentina game as well. It was a good first half, if you remember, and after that the worst second half possible, and you concede a late goal, and you lost point. So I don't know. My sensation is that it's the same of actually the last years. At some point all the organization, except obviously the management. I don't think the management is happy with that. But all the organization into the field at some point decide that could sit on the results, could sit on the standing, and comfortable with a Champions League spot and nothing more. That's my genuine impression.
That's true. And I mean, if you look at the fact that Inter have thrown away 20 points, they would have been comfortably leading if they've only had 10 of them. I mean, I completely get that. They would have been able to bother Juventus seriously. I mean, if they just got half of those 20 points that they threw away, that's 78 points, and you're 2 points ahead of Juventus in your first season. So yeah, no, you're absolutely right. Right. Let's. I mean, we've got two games coming up this weekend, or this midweek. One is against bottom's hopeless SPAL, which anything else other than a Brescia type win is just a disaster. So I don't think there's much to talk about. Although I want to say that last week we all kind of predicted that 7 points from those 3 games against Hellas, Torino, and SPAL. So let's see if that prediction still stands. But now on Sunday night, it's Inter against Roma, and if there's any club in this league that has had a turbulent time, just like Inter, it is the Giallorossi. I mean, James Pallotta and all the madness and the infantile fighting on WhatsApp between the sporting director Petracchi, who attacks Pallotta, who doesn't speak a word of Italian, in Italian on WhatsApp. Pallotta has this translated to him, and then he kind of suspends him, aka sacks him. I mean, not to mention Brian Cristante as your central defender. I mean, it's really, really not looking well. But having said that, Roma have looked a little bit better, and I really don't know what to expect against Roma, because these two teams are mad. They're mad as hell. They're bonkers. They're batshit crazy, both of them. And I think anything can happen. Mo, what do you expect is going to happen? What do you think can happen? Like, if you just look into the Mystic Mo crystal ball, what are you thinking?
Well, look, I'm always a man who relies on intuition rather than facts and science, right?
You'd fit in well in the UK. That's all I could say. You'd be a great UK politician.
And as an expert,
you'd be a great US president.
And as an expert in factless opinion, I'd like to think that I wholeheartedly agree with you in the fact that I think that in the second half something did click, and I really like the analogy of control, especially with regards to the Sampdoria game. I agree with it. It's something that I can't put into words. But it's something that I felt now, and you articulated well enough to make the thought, solidify in my mind. So if that is in fact the case, and we are going to take 3 points from SPAL, then I just think there's going to be sufficient momentum to make sure that our, I don't know about dementia, when you want to call it, our schizophrenia, our multiple personality disorder, whatever it is as a club, is buried deep enough, and Roma's is just, I think it's irreconcilable, irredeemable. It's they're off the ledge. There's nothing to save their season now. So I think I think we should look optimistically at both these matches. But
Yeah.
That's no surprise coming from me.
And also, this is Inter, so you never know. Fulvio, what are you thinking going into Roma?
Well, what I think is that before going to Roma, I would like to have a fast watch on the SPAL game, and I think Inter will win this game. SPAL is doomed. It's practically going to surrender because it's probably 1.5 feet into the Serie B right now. So what I think is going to happen, I think that Inter will win this game, which practically is going to seal the Champions League spot. And after that, I predict in the remaining more games, like 5 or 6 points in 5 games. You choose how to distribute that. But I expect something like this. After we seal the Champions League spot, we are not going to play consistently anymore. So this could start with Roma. Probably a draw would be the most realistic results. But I don't know. I think that the amount of points from here to the end of the season is not going to exceed the 10 points. Probably 8 or 9 points.
So missing Will's 80-point mark by just a couple of points.
Yeah, I'm not confident about the 80 now. It needs 4 wins. I don't think we get 4 wins with this run of games.
I mean, it's Atalanta, Fiorentina, Roma, Napoli.
No, the last two are Atalanta and Napoli. So you're gonna have to win the 4 before that.
Yeah, but that's what I mean. I mean, it's like it's Fiorentina. The games we're going is SPAL, Roma, Fiorentina, Genoa, Napoli, Atalanta. I mean.
Yeah, we're going to lose to Genoa because they need to stay up. So you can write that one off. It's the third last. We've already done that years ago. So even an empty Moratti is not a nice place for us at the end of the season. Sorry, go on.
So sorry, I just I'd like to put a silver lining on what Fulvio is saying. I think if you take your foot off the gas, it means you're preserving something for something else. And I'd like to then re-invite you to my prediction about the Europa League. So,
I have to say, I'm glad you brought that up. No, I'm glad you brought that up because
I have an optimistic take on everyone else's pessimistic take. Whatever take you got, I can spin it.
No, I know. It's like you're like a positive version of I don't know. I don't know. Never mind. Let's not get into that. But I was gonna say, but after having watched the draw. I'm going to go even further and say I demand a final of the Europa League now because I'm sorry, with all due respect to Wolfsburg and Bayer Leverkusen and Getafe and all that, if Inter need to get to the final because they don't have any of the good teams. Sevilla, Roma, Wolverhampton, Man United, all on the other end on the other half. So I think a final is I think we can demand that now, to be honest.
Yeah, if you thought my sort of level of optimism for the rest of the league season was low, you haven't heard my thoughts on the Europa League in August. This mythical final 8.
We're not going to get into that because we got episodes to look forward to that.
Yeah, look forward to that. Yeah,
he said with slight irony in his voice.
We've been put in a draw with all the German teams that run, and you think we're going to get through that? Yeah.
Oh God! Right. Let's move on to the part of the show where we pay tribute, rip the piss out of, and criticize someone or something heavily in the world of football. Starting with the negativity, this week's Moggi, which will be presented by Mr. Fulvio Santucci.
Okay, so. We need to talk about Samir Handanovic, guys. Once again, we are at that point in which we need to talk to Samir Handanovic. So let's try to make a serious point here. Of course, I'm referring to the big mistake against Torino. Luckily, it was not a mistake that led to a draw or to a lost game. Luckily, but. It's not the first one, and it's easily predictable that it won't be the last one. So everybody just minimize this, like always, like usual, and say that mistakes can happen, and the goalkeeper is not the main problem. We need to stay focused to the rest of the of the team, of the lack of the teams, and this is all true. But we need to remember that the situation of Inter now is not the same of 5 or 6 years ago when Handanovic was a luxury for this team. You remember that we remember our banter era in which Handanovic actually made the best season in Inter, but we are not at that point anymore. So it's time to be told. It's time to speak about this. Handanovic is good. Yes, it's good. It probably is surely not the worst goalkeeper in the league. It's probably one of the best, and we agree about that. But it's not enough. It's not about the mistakes, guys. It's not about the mistake Handanovic do. It's about how you recover from them. And a goalkeeper which captain a team that want to win, 36 years, a great experience, showed yesterday that he wasn't able to mentally recover from his mistake and jeopardize, in my opinion, the victory of Inter by giving not the safety that the team needs. What people keep talking, you always remember the bad stuff and not the good stuff. But I think it's a matter of perspective here, because a great goalkeeper is not about the number of saves. It's about the consistency of his performances. Just ask Mr. Alisson, Mr. Ter Stegen, just to mention the modern one. But also we can rely to Mr. Iker Casillas, right? You cannot remember so many mistakes, or if you remember some mistakes in their peak, in their era, also Buffon is one of this. You can always tell that they recovered, and especially for us, for Inter supporters, a goalkeeper is not enough to achieve the expectation. Should exceed the expectation, like Julius Caesar did, like Zenga did, and that's what I think. I think that this problem needs to be solved. Probably it's not urgent. Probably it's not the most urgent need to be taken care of at Inter. But as time goes, we cannot recognize Handanovic as a winning player. And one of the best goalkeeper of all time, I'm talking about Dino Zoff, world champions with Italy in 1982, once said that the goalkeeper is the one who spread his mental attitude to the rest of the squad more than any other player on the field. So if this is true, and actually I rely a goalkeeper like him, this cannot be the right attitude for Inter great plans. So I think it's time for a change. Sorry, Samir, I I love you, even though we don't have always a good time together. But I think it's really time to think about a change. And you are my Moggi of the week because it's well deserved.
P.S. Agree. Happy birthday, Samir.
and
because today is his birthday.
Yes, it is. And also, just before we went on this pod, Sky Sport Italia reporting that Inter have agreed to extend Samir Handanovic's contract until.
Of course.
I'm sorry, Fulvio.
Of course. It's always like that.
I'm sorry, Fulvio, but it's true. Gianluca Di Marzio and the rest of the Sky Sport.
Yeah, I know. But guys, this is just Pastorello stuff. Pastorello stuff.
Yeah.
Candreva will be the same. Without any apparent reason, Candreva will extend with Inter.
Yeah. So. Until the end of
Samir Handanovic, here we go.
Yes, until 2022 June is when he's going to extend it to. But look, I think you're absolutely right, Fulvio. I think it's time to move on. And I think that it's time for Samir. I don't think it's necessarily the time to part ways with Samir, but I think it's time to bring in a new number one at Inter. In the same way that Francesco Toldo became a backup to Julio Cesar. I think that's the kind of thing we need to go after. And I couldn't agree with you more, because it's he for everything you just said, pretty much. But when it comes to, I would like to, drunk driving, Marcelo Brozovic, for goodness sakes, man, don't sit behind the wheels of a car when you drink alcohol. It's as simple as that, period. That's just a little addendum there. Right, let's move on to something much more positive. This week's Moratti, which is presented by Mr. Mohamed Nasser.
He works a lot, he's intelligent, and he surprises people sometimes with his ideas. Not easy to find one person of these qualities.
So this week I don't have one, but two Morattis. The first Moratti is last week's Moggi, our very own Will Beckman.
Come on.
Biscotto.
Oh, my God.
No, but honestly, for the tweet about and the Hellas game, where you can't risk squandering a lead if you've already gone behind in the first half, or as fast as possible, which then became a premonition for the match yesterday. But jokes aside, the real Moggi of the week, the real Moratti of the week for me is Borja Valero again. I don't know what they're feeding this guy. Whatever he's on, I want to be on all the time. But honestly, to have this 35-year-old man who seemed, washed away, completely useless, and to be fair, it's not like he's putting in, world-class, world-beating performances, but to have him fight for the squad and perform at a top physical, relatively top physical condition for 70, 80 minutes of every match, and to be a reliable cog in the midfield engine that that has been decimated by injury, especially since post resumption of the league. I just hats off to this guy. He just head down, works really hard, runs as much as he can, different positions. And yesterday, he's playing. He's doing everything that we want Eriksen to be doing. Of course, Eriksen has infinitely more quality to his touches, and it was immediately evident when he stepped onto the pitch. But Valero was tracking back. He was defending at a back left and a back right position. He was covering for the wing backs. This is stuff that Eriksen does not do. Of course, you in return you get so much more vision and class in the final third. But he's a very pleasant surprise post resumption. It pains me to see him on the field because it means that we're missing the starting midfield, which is Barella, Brozovic, or Nsensi, or Barella, Brozovic, and Eriksen. But he's been a real good team player for the amount of physical effort that he's put out.
I think the attitude from him and Alexis Sanchez is exactly so.
Yes, yeah.
I mean, it's just both of those for me this week. I mean, look, talk about wanting to be where you are and fighting for the shirt. And I think both of them really, really did that, and they really led the way. Alexis Sanchez and Borja Valero, because Borja Valero looks about at the 80th minute, he looks like he's going to die from tiredness. Like he looks beyond exhausted.
Absolutely.
And that is just that commitment is awesome to see. Right. Let's move on to something much more comical. Last week's Moggi, and this week's Moratti, who'll be presenting this week's frog, Mr. Billiam Beckman.
È clamoroso! Autogol di Ranocchia!
Bingo card completed.
Full circle.
This one is
full circle,
yeah, everything covered. No, this one is sort of very slapstick, so I'm sure Nima's going to enjoy it. There's some childish humour in this week's frog. It's Michael Atherton, who is a former cricketer who commentates on cricket for Sky Sports in the UK. Cricket returned this week to our screens. England, I think, we're playing the West Indies. But he had a rather unfortunate moment during commentary during one of the quieter periods. They often read out tweets from people that are watching, and I think often people tweet in sort of updates from what's going on at their local cricket club, and then the commentators will read them out, sort of give them a bit of airtime and a moment of fame. But he fell for one of those sort of Simpsons-style gags that they used to do on Mo when he was called up by rude names in his tavern. And so somebody tweeted in, unbelievable scenes at Cockermouth Cricket Club with Hugh Jardon bowling 6 for 9. And Atherton did not really appreciate the true intention of this tweet, and he read it out as if it was news.
Come on.
And,
no, he didn't.
He did. There's a video. There's a video of it. So Ben Stokes is just preparing to have a ball bowled at him, and he goes, Hugh Jardon just bowled 6 for 9 at Cockermouth, and the next 30 seconds of commentary is just hysterical laughter from him and his two colleagues as they realise what they've just done on national television. So I think it's not a football one. I like to keep them in the realms of football if possible, but that one is just so quintessential Frog, just falling for a very simple and fairly predictable joke. I think he needs that award.
If we want to keep it in the world of football, we can keep it within Inter HQ, and whoever wanted to send an email to Steven Zhang ended up sending it to everyone at the club. I don't even know what the hell, this is so bizarre and funny and crazy that to me that is just only at Inter. I saw a guy who responded to that when we were reporting that story. He quoted that article we tweeted out, and he put in do.not.reply.to.all. I don't even know where to go with this. It's just, either it's incredible incompetence, which I hope it is, because that's the best case scenario, or someone is trying to, wanted this to happen, which is very sinister, and we don't know that. So I'm hoping for the former, which is more funny. Emails, high-tech shit. Right, that's all we had time for this week. I'd like to thank Nicky Bandini. I'd like to thank last week's Moggi, this week's Moratti, and Mr. Billiam Beckman for presenting this week's Frog and the pod and everything he said today on the pod. Thank you, Will.
Thank you. I predicted 4 points last week. I predict the same this week. For the
nice one. And as always, Mr. Fulvio Santucci, thank you for coming on. It's always a pleasure to have you.
Thank you, Nima. Always a pleasure for me to be here.
And Mr. Positivity and Mystic Mo, I hope you're right. Europa League on the second spot.
Let's hope so. Always a pleasure. Thanks, guys. Great talk today. Bye.
And as always, I'm your host Nima Ruzzari, wishing you all a good week. 6 points and sempre e solo forza Inter.